Hey guys, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to create the portal system that I have been talking about for 20 episodes now. The portal system we're going to be doing is a bit more complex than what I had in mind from the beginning, where we would just have one portal connect to another portal, then they could go back and forth to each other, a simple link between the two portals. What I want to do now is, in fact, have a network of portals that can be linked to any number of other portals, and then we'll have a pop-up menu that allows us to select which portal we want to go to. And to do this, we'll simply have a portal object that defines what a portal is, and we'll have these on our portals throughout our world, which in this case are just these fountain things from the simple, the polygon pack, or the low polygon pack. And then we'll have a controller. It's just going to be some kind of portal handler that's going to allow us to know which portal goes where whenever we click on a button, and it's going to take us there. It'll be very simple. So I'm going to create a C# script file. This is going to be the portal controller, and this is going to act as, it's going to be on an empty object that will have a child panel, and this is going to handle toggling that panel on and off and also populating it with buttons based on the portal that was clicked. So if I click on a portal that can teleport me to these 5 different places, then the portal controller is going to be responsible for taking the portal that I clicked on and then giving me the appropriate buttons that allows me to teleport to the locations that that portal supports. So I'm going to create that empty object and add the portal controller to it. I then want to create the child object that's going to be the panel, and I'm just going to call it panel underscore to keep it in line with the other names. And this is going to be the panel that is toggled on and off, and it's going to also be populated with the buttons that I was speaking of. And I'm also going to go to action items, and I'm going to create the portal script. Now this is going to be the object that is the actual portal. And I want to actually set up the actual portal object and grab the model from the low poly folder that we have. It's at the very bottom here. And I'm going to drag this out into my scene view. It's actually got to be scaled up. It's a very small model, and we're going to make it match the scale of the other items. Something about that size. And I'm going to place it right over here. Actually, let's place one over here. Doesn't really matter how we're going to do this. And I want to call this is the cave portal. I'm going to call it cave because I'm going to place this in an empty object called portals. So I'm going to take my cave portal and place it within my portals object. And what I'm going to do is actually center this into the world 0, 0, 0, and then place this. I'm doing it backwards here. Beautiful. So now I know that I want to be able to click on a portal or click on a well. We're going to call it portal. And it actually interact with that object. Walk up to the object and then call the interact method on that object. So to make that happen, what do we have to do? Well, the first thing I have to do is I have to tag this object as an interactable object because that's how we have it set up in our interaction system. And I'm also going to create a script for portal. It's portal, but I want to actually inherit from our action item. So if we look at action item, if we don't remember what this is, go to the definition of this. It inherits from interactable, which does all the interactable stuff that we need, which is cool. And we have this overridden interact method, which action item doesn't do anything by default. So we could actually just avoid this. We don't have to override this in action item, but we do have to override it in portal. So it's going to do different things in portal than, say, our item pickup does or our signpost does, right? They do different things. So we'll override that in portal when we get to that point. But what I want to do is I want to take portal and I'm going to add it to my cave. So now portal is an interactable object. Okay, that's great. So clearly I need to stop using 4.6 and C#6 because crashing was never a problem before I changed to that. And I know it's in beta, it's experimental, so I can't complain about it. That's fine. So I'm going to change, for now, to the stable version, which may actually break some of the things I have that rely on C#6. I'll see if I have to change any of those things. I probably pointed out in the episodes that we used those that it was reliant upon the experimental build. So if yours breaks, then you know what the reason is. Yeah, so I auto-implemented a property with an initializer. Can't do that. So I'm going to... So I have to actually initialize the list like we would before we start adding to it, which is no problem. And I can actually let it initialize it in one statement and also add the values to it for me, just like that. Okay, so now I'm on the stable version. I'm going to create this again. All right, so we're back to where we were now before we crashed. I'm just going to name this cave again. And what I want to do on my portal, I want to add a box collider. And this is going to be what we interact with whenever we click on the object. So I can make this kind of the click box that I want to be able to click on when I am trying to use the portal. So I can make it whatever size I would like. I'm just going to make it about the size, bring it up here, about the size of the actual object. I could get specific with this, get the numbers of the actual size of the object and then match it to that. I'm not going to care that much though. There we go. So now I have, looks a little bulky. Can't click on anything behind it. It's fine though, it'll work for us. So now I have this hopefully interactable object. So I'm going to go back into my game here. I have the panel in the way, but that's fine. I'm going to click on the well, and I walk up to it and I stop, just like you would expect when you click on any kind of object, right? Walk up to it and you stop. Cool. So now interaction is happening. It's taken me to the point. It's calling the interact method on the interactable object. Great. So now what I want to do, so on portal, I want to create a property that's going to be a vector 3, and I'm going to call it teleport location. Now this is going to be just the simple position that we teleport to whenever we're teleporting to this portal. So if I am at portal A and I decide to teleport to portal B, I'm going to grab portal B's teleport location and make that be my player's position. Make sense? Okay, so to do that, I'll take teleport location in start and I'll set it to be equal to the current location of this portal that we're on, and then offset the X or the Z so we're actually off the center of the portal. So there's a couple of ways we can handle doing this. We can do it like this, where I take the current transform position, it's a vector 3, and I add to it a vector that is like a 1, 0, 0 or a 0, 0, 1, and I'm multiplying it by 2 to make it like a 2, 0, 0 instead of just being 1 unit. And that's actually going to offset us on the X in this case by 2 units and to the right, and that's what we would want. Or we can also just define a new vector 3 where we take the transform.position.x, add to it 2 units, and then just use the other xy, and then transform.position.z if you wanted to have more control over the other positions. I'll keep it that way for now, it's fine. And then I also want to have a method that's going to be overriding the interact method, right? So we're going to have an override void, and it's going to tell me you can override these. These are the things that are marked as overridable in the action item or in the actual interactable class. So I'm going to choose interact. And for this, I don't need to call the base interact method because it doesn't do anything that we need. We're going to override the entire functionality of the base interact method. And for now, it's not going to do anything. We're just going to have it there for whenever I want to fill this out. And for now, the last thing that a portal is going to need is an array of the portals that it can teleport you to. So if you click on portal A and it can go to B and C, we have to have an array of B and C so we know what portals we can go to. We're going to assign these values in the inspector. It's going to be a private portal array, and I'm going to call it linked portals. And since we're going to assign these values in the inspector, I'm going to serialize this field, which means it's going to tag it as serializable for the Unity serializer and expose it to the inspector even though it's private. So now let's go back into Unity. Now on my portal I have an array. It's called linked portals. And I can set it to say this is going to go to 2 different portals. And then all we'd have to do is assign the portals that this portal can go to right here in the inspector, which is pretty cool. Just drag and drop, right? So to do this, I'm going to actually create a couple other portals here. I'm going to place one out here, somewhere out there, and then I'll place one. I mean, this doesn't matter to me. It's up to you however you want to lay yours out. Place one down here. I'm going to call this slime fields. And I'll call this one marsh. I don't know, whatever you want it to be. And what we're going to do actually is take the names of the portals, the actual name of the object, and use that to fill out the text information for our button. So the button will say the name of the portal in it, which is pretty cool. So now let's say the cave portal will teleport you to slime fields and the marsh. That's all you have to do, right? And here comes the train, so I'm going to pause. Alright, he's mostly gone. So now I'm going to take my slime fields, and he can teleport to only one portal. He can go to the cave. And then Marsh can teleport, for example, to 3 portals, but we don't have 3 portals. So I guess I could just say it can go to Marsh and slime fields and cave. Nothing's going to say it can't go to itself. I mean, it's pointless, but I just want to show you that you can have 1, 2, and 3, 50, 100, doesn't matter. However many make sense in your game and however many your UI can handle. So there we go. We now have our portal set up. So what I want to do is actually go in and write a bit of the portal controller that's going to handle the important bits of this, and then we can actually finish this up. So I'm going to go into my portals, this object we created here, and I didn't add my portal controller to that. Well, I may have, but then I crashed, so I did again. So the portal controller is going to have to find a reference to the panel that is a child of it, so that's simple enough. Just do a simple find on the transform component. And it also needs a reference to the player because we're going to take the player and move it somewhere. So that's going to be simple enough by a simple get object by type. I also want to have a button prefab assigned to this so I can actually populate the panel with buttons that we don't have to construct from scratch. Easy enough to do. Then we're going to add listeners as we need that are going to be dynamically assigned a parameter so that we can actually decide what portal that button is connected to. Very simple. And we'll also just store the array of the portals that whatever portal we're clicking on has, so we can actually just reference those very easily inside of our portal controller. So first of all, we need to assign the button in the inspector to keep it easy. We can just drag and drop. Now we can place it in the resources folder or somewhere that we can actually reference directly in a directory somewhere. But we're going to keep it simple with doing it in the inspector. So I'm just going to do a private button, which is actually from the UI namespace. We know that, right? Using using unityengine.ui. Private button. I'm going to call it button. Simple enough. And then I also want to have that array I talked about. It's going to be the portal array. Not even that necessary, but I would like to take that and store it locally on portal controller and then just use that reference right there. I then want the player reference. I want to have a private player. And then we want to go to the panel object. It's going to be a game object called panel, which is going to be a reference to the child panel that we have as a child of this portal controller. Simple enough. So button, like I said, is going to be a serialized field because we're going to actually assign that in the inspector. And that means that these aren't going to be, so we can easily make these properties. But since I typed them out as fields, we're going to leave them as fields because that's how it already is. So now, player. I can grab the player reference simply by saying player is equal to find object of type, and then saying I'm looking for player. Because in our game, there's only one player object type. It's a single player game. There's not going to be 2 player object types. And this is going to simply look through our scene and find the first object that has the type player and return that value to us, which is what we want. a reference to that value. Cool. So now what I want is the panel reference, right? So do a panel is equal to, and now the panel is a child of this component or of this object. So I can say transform dot find. And I believe it's been a while. I believe find child is deprecated. Yes, it is. Okay, so find. And we're looking for, I believe it was panel portal. And we want the game object of that. So there we go. Now we have panel assigned and we have player assigned. And that's all we need for our start on this. So now what I want to do is I want to make a method. It's going to be a public void activate portal. And we're going to call this from the portal object whenever we click on it. And it's going to actually set up the panel. It's going to add the buttons to it and then set up the listeners for that button or for each individual button. And then it's going to pass it on. So whenever we click on the button, we're going to actually be able to teleport to a portal that we clicked on. Pretty cool. So for this to work, it will need a portal array passed to it. And we can do that simply from our portal object, pass it that portal object's portal array. Simple enough. So whenever we activate the portal, I want to take the panel and set it active as true, which means it's going to enable the panel so we can see it, right? And whenever we actually use the panel, I'm going to disable the panel. And by default, the panel will be disabled. So you're not going to see the panel with the portal buttons in it. Now, all we're going to do is we're going to loop through each portal that we have passed to activate portal. And then we're going to instantiate a button. And we're going to add listeners to that button and then set up the name for that button. Very simple to do. We're doing it this way as opposed to, again, an object pool because we don't have a system in place in our game, but it'd be a rather simple system to get. There's plenty out there. You can just go copy and paste one and pretty much use that for anything like this that you're going to be destroying and reinstantiating again and again, but we're only doing that for a couple objects at a time. It's not going to be that big of a deal for us. So I'm going to create a for loop here. I is less than portals.length. So for each portal that we have, I'm going to instantiate a button. So I'm going to say a button. I'm going to call it portal button is equal to, and then we're going to instantiate like we normally would. Instantiate button, which is the field that we're going to assign an inspector. And then we need to give it a parent. So the parent for the button is going to be panel. Actually, it needs to be a transform, my bad. So panel.transform, there we go. And now it's going to actually assign panel as the parent for button. And when we set up the panel with the vertical layout group, it'll handle positioning for us. So we don't have to position it or anything like that. We simply have to assign the parent, and then the parent will handle the layout of the panel. Easy enough. So now what I want to do is take the portal button, and I want to get the child object of portal button because we know the child object is the text object that has the text on the button. So I'm going to take portal button dot get component in children. So we know the component on that object is a text component, right? Simple enough, text. And then grab the text field of that component, which is the actual string value that it shows you on the screen, and set it to be equal to what? What is it going to be equal to? Well, it's going to be equal to the name of the portal object. So I can say portals i.name. And that's going to refer to the actual name of the object, cave, slime fields, and marsh. So now there's a cool issue that we have to fix here. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to set up listeners for these buttons. And the listeners are going to pass a parameter that is the index of this loop. So I, right? Simple enough. We're going to pass I to the listener and assign that as the parameter for whenever that button is called, whenever that button is clicked on. But the problem with that is the way that this works, whenever we pass an anonymous function or a delegate inside this loop, it's going to pass the last value of the index once the loop has concluded. So we're going to copy the value. We're not going to reference a value because an integer is a value type. So we're going to actually just copy the value of I every loop that we go through into another integer and then use that to pass as a value type through the parameter to the listener. Easy enough to do, sounds confusing, but we're going to do int x equals I. That's all we got to do. It can be anything, we're going to call it x. So now x is equal to I every time we loop through this. You may be thinking, well, that makes no sense. It's going to change every time. It's going to be the same thing every time. But whenever we pass I is when we get the issue. Whenever I pass a copy of I, it's not affected. And I'll show you how that works right now. So portal button is a button, so we can go through the onClick event. And I can say add listener, done this before. And we can add the listener with a delegate, as we've done before, and then pass the method that is going to be the listener for this. Whenever the onClick event is going to call this method whenever it happens. And a delegate is just, and a brief example, is just a way to assign a method as a parameter. It's one of the main reasons to use a delegate. So to do this, I can now assign a method as a parameter. But we don't have a method to assign. So I'm going to create a void. It's going to be on portal button click. And it's going to take an int portal index. So now I want to call on portal button click and pass it x. So on portal button click and pass it x. There we go. Now we could define this with an anonymous function with a lambda operator, as we've done before, with the empty parentheses, the equal sign, greater sign, and on the right side your expression, or in this case just the function. On the left side your anonymous, just the empty parentheses. But we're keeping it with a delegate because we've done that throughout the rest of this series, I believe. So now we have a listener assigned to this button. So whenever the button is clicked on, it has a reference to what button in the loop was clicked. And it just so happens that the buttons also refer to the portals because we're looping through each portal. So the second button, which would be 1, the index of 1, would refer to the second portal, or the index of 1 portal. So what do we do with that? Well, I can take the player.transform.position and set it to be equal to portals, which we don't have a reference to. Now, what I said I wanted to do was actually take a local copy of this, and that would be fine, except this is a public method and this is a private field. I'll just pass it through. So I'm going to pass a portal array as portals, and then just pass portals. And the reason we're doing this is because this needs to know what portals that this portal can go to, so we can actually pass the index to it and that work. Now I could actually pass, I like this better. I like this idea better. Let's pass a single portal. This makes a whole lot more sense to me. Pass a single portal of the index that we found. So now it's going to take one portal from that array and pass it to the on portal button click event. So now we only have one portal to work with. Each button only refers to one portal, right? So we don't need an array of portals every single time. That's just unnecessary. So what we could do is say portal.teleport location. So now player.transform.position is equal to portal.teleport location, and that's what we need. Very cool. And I also want to take the panel set active to false. And I'll also have to destroy the buttons whenever we do this, since we don't have a recycling system, but we'll get to that here in a second. So now back on portal, when I interact, what do I need to do? I need to call the portal controller and say activate portal, then pass it this array. Cool, right? So I need to do that, but I have to have a private portal controller reference called portal controller. And I get this in the start value, portal controller. Actually, I'll make this a property and then say portal controller is equal to find object of type portal controller. And now we're doing this a couple times, but it's not that big of a deal because we're only doing it whenever this object is initialized. And for us, these objects are initialized whenever the scene is loaded, right? So you're not going to see a hit on performance because we're looking through the entire scene for a certain type. And even if that were the case, we're looking for a certain type. It's a much more efficient route than looking for a string name if you're looking for an object type. So now I can take the portal controller and go and say activate portal and pass it my portals array. Does not exist in current context. Oh, sorry, it's linked portals. Very cool. So now we should have something working if this is all done right. So if I go back into Unity, I want to create a button on this. I want to make a button. Oh, not like that. Sorry, I want to create a UI button. And it can be called button. It doesn't really matter. On my panel, I'm going to make it a vertical layout group. And it's going to have padding of 10 and spacing of 5. So the padding's around the panel, the spacing's between the objects. And I'm going to say child control size width. And now the panel can be resized to whatever I would like it to be. I'm going to increase the alpha so it's not transparent. And I also want to add a UI text object to the top of this panel. And I'm going to make it say locations. So it's the label for the panel. Center it horizontally and vertically. And then I want to take the panel, and the last thing I want to do is add a content size fitter so we can make the panel vertically fit the amount of content that we have. So vertical fit, unconstrained, change that to preferred, and now we have a nice looking panel here. I'm going to zero this out, anchor it in the middle, zero it out, there we go. And now it's attached to the center of this empty object called portals. And what I want to do is I want to create a prefab from this button. So I'm just going to actually add it to my resources folder, just drag and drop. And I always have a generic button as a prefab, very simple. And I'm going to add it to my field for button just like that. And then delete. Now, if I hide this panel by disabling it, let's see what happens. I can walk, click on the portal. It pops up. Cool. So that's a good sign, good start. Locations, slime fields, and marsh, which happen to be the names of the portals. Very cool. So now if I click on slime fields, it teleports me to, the portal, but then I walk back. I'm like, I don't want to be here. I want to be over here because I don't have a path for this location, but I still have a path destination set for wherever I clicked before. And the way I can fix that is when we interact, and you may want to do this for all of your objects, upon interacting, just reset the path. But in this case, I'm going to be safe and only do it for my interact method on my portal. But it would make sense to have it for everything because you don't need a path once you've gotten to where you're going, right? And our interactable objects happen to have a reference to our player agent. So I can say player agent.reset path. And that will remove the path that we have set as the destination for this agent. Click on the portal, slime fields, teleports me there, and I don't walk back, which is what I want. So this one can go to, so it can go to slime fields, marsh, and cave. But in fact, this one should only be able to go to cave. And I think it'll break if I go to slime fields because it doesn't have, what did break? Cave. So all it's doing is adding buttons to the already existing buttons because we're not deleting the buttons when we're done with them. So to do that, I'll simply go through all of the objects in the panel and delete the buttons. For each button, button in, and then we're going to get a collection of buttons by doing a get component in children button. So this will return, get components in children with the actual collection version of that. This will return an array of buttons that it found in this panel. And all I have to do then is say destroy button, not game object. So now it's going to destroy the actual game object. And the reason I'm doing it specifically for the button type in the children is because we also have a text object in there, and we don't want to delete the text object. It needs to be there all the time. Let's try it out one more time, see what happens. Going to go to this portal. Need to move it because that guy's in the way, but it's fine. Slime fields, cave, marsh, marsh, slime fields, cave, marsh. It all works, right? And I can place as many as I want. I can throw them throughout my world. I can change the way that I actually teleport there. So instead of teleporting to the same spot on each one, I could add an empty object that just is a transform component and place it around each object individually. Something like create empty, and then I would have this transform component that I could place around my object, and I could use it as the location that I teleport to instead of creating the arbitrary 2 units off to the right thing. I could make this be the location I teleport to. So find child of location, and then make that the teleport location. Very simple. And then I can add a gizmo to this so I can see it in my scene view. All kinds of cool things you could do with this. I plan on using this to end the series whenever we make our last quest with the little dungeon hike that we're going to do. It's going to be a simple couple hallways that we walk down, kill a couple mobs, get an item, come back out by using a teleporter, and talk to a guy to get a reward. And then that's going to be the end of the series, guys. It's kind of died down. People aren't that interested because I've taken a couple breaks. And honestly, when a series goes on this long, people just, as it goes along, they stray off on their own path, and then my stuff doesn't really apply, or they realize it's not what they want by the 5th episode, and they just stop watching, or the 6th episode, or they realize there's, tens and tens of hours of content, and it kind of is overwhelming, and I understand that. So I'm looking forward to starting smaller things on the channel where if we do a series, it's going to be like 3 or 4 episodes long. And I do have a plan of actually releasing a full course on a couple of games on Udemy. So if you guys would be interested in that, that is a way you could support the channel. I released a couple of assets and they sold decently. But the thing that I hear a lot of is I like it, but I don't want to buy it because I want to learn how to do stuff myself. I wish I could support you, but I don't need this asset. It would be just like throwing away money. And I get that because you want to learn how to do it yourself. So what I'm going to do is, it's not going to take away from the channel at all. It's going to be something else I do on the side. And I'm going to create premium courses on Udemy. And I'm going to give you guys big discounts to purchase it if you are interested in that kind of thing. And we're going to cover like creating a platformer or creating different kinds of small games from beginner level to up to advanced level. And it's all going to be things that you can purchase to support the creation of content like you see here on GameGrind and also for GameGrind. And I hope you guys are looking forward to that. Hope you have some nice things to say about the idea. If not, they'll let me hear both sides, right? If you don't like the idea, I understand that it's scary that it's going to take away content from GameGrind, from the channel, but it's simply not going to, because I am done for a while of creating these long series. I want to stick to short one-off episodes and maybe a couple or 3 episode long series where we cover smaller things. But this series, I'm sure most of you know this, has been draining for me because it has gone on for nearly 30 episodes now, and the views just aren't there to get excited about it. It's just, I'm glad you guys are enjoying it, the ones that have stuck around, the couple thousand of you that have made it this far, and there's more of you that will come along as time goes on, and I get that. But as I'm making them, I'm not seeing the excitement anymore about it, so that's fine, and I understand that's how it works. So I'm going to change up what we do on the channel with some smaller series and some cooler little episodes that we're going to be doing. So, but that's not the end of the Simple RPG because you guys have it, right? It's in your hands. You can do whatever you want to with it. I would like to see what you guys are working on the forum. That'd be awesome. So anyway, I'm done rambling. I'll see you in the next episode of whatever it may be. We're going to actually create the dungeon, I think, for the next episode of the Simple RPG. And then that's going to be it, guys. My name is Austin, and I will see you next time.